today's modern dependence on technology, on this interconnectivity. With social media and texting and everything like that, it is commonly accused that these modern day conveniences, these elements of interconnectivity, that things aren't real anymore, that we're not really talking to each other. We're kind of in a days we're all connected to these things, that we don't really connect with people anymore, despite the idea of this interconnectivity with Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Discord, all these other things that we have available to us. And that's not without its truth. Science has shown that when we're online talking to someone else, our brains, they're hardwired for that interpersonal face-to-face connection. And when we're talking to someone else online, our brains don't think we're talking to a person. We know there's someone on the other screen, whether it's texting, online, Facebook, or something. We know there's someone else out there. We know someone's going to read it eventually. But our brains don't think we are. We still get that little endorphin boost, that little satisfaction of, yeah, we did it. We said something to someone. But when we say something to someone and we don't think they're real people, regardless of knowing that they're real people, our brain fools us. We tend to be a little bolder, maybe a little more aggressive, maybe even ruder when we do these things. And we don't worry as much if we hurt someone's feelings even sometimes online. We like to state our case and go like, well, that's just what it is. We're going to state our case, and the world can deal with it. Because in that social media, everyone is subject to our stage, not vice versa, as it were, with these sort of connections. Down a little bit. I'm going to get to this in a minute. So like I said, we don't think that we're talking to people when we're talking to people online. We've lost that personal connection, that we've lost that intimacy to it. And of course that never happens anywhere else, right? When we're in person, there's no other way we could obfuscate and disconnect from other people as we're talking to them or interacting with them in any means whatsoever. But would you consider cars real? Conversation is real, right? And yet on the road, there's that just enough layer of obfuscation that our brains don't always think that there are other people in the cars. It's just some other driver, someone else. And so, yeah, we tend to be more aggressive on the road than we might actually be in life. And we don't worry about whether or not we hurt their feelings because we had to jump in front of them. They should have gotten out of our way. Even if we're talking on the phone. How many of us have been able to hide a reaction because we were on the phone and we had that layer of obfuscation between us and the other person? We're like, yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, no, it's fine. I've seen people talking to someone and then just set the phone down and keep every so often go, yep, and just left it alone. And unfortunately, a lot of us have grown skilled enough at these layers of obfuscation that even in a face-to-face conversation we hide. Put ourselves behind these walls. So what is real if we're going to challenge these things? This social media trend. What about, and I think I'll start sharing now, what is real? Is it real if you check your phone because you got a text and someone shared a meme with you? Do you not laugh? Or, based on your opinion of memes in general, are you disgusted because you can't stand memes? There it is. But is that laughter, is that disgust not real in that sense? Regardless of what the meme is. See, I'm going to jump back over here in just a minute. Actually, I guess I need to pull my notes back up. I did not think this through. I'm going to be popping that back up and up, down just a minute. Sorry. So what about when you've had a crap day and someone sends you a text just to let you know they were thinking of you? Is that warmth? Not real. What about when you add something to the prayer list and you get a direct message from someone else of support, letting you know they're in your prayers, not just another emoji in the thread? When you get that direct message from them, is that not their still earnest effort to let you know that you'll be there? But maybe they're sending it in the middle of church so they don't disturb nothing. They want to make sure they let you know. Maybe they're busy or were thinking of you and they knew you would be busy. It's work hours or whatever, and they just wanted to drop something off so that you would know. And that's not to discredit the emojis that may be in a common thread between people. One, I normally say less than an emoji in the thread. A lot of the times when we get updates, I'm actually with Sherry, and she'll say something, and as far as I'm concerned, it's covered our reaction. However, two, these emojis are still saying something to the applicant to the prayer list. Is applicant the right word? Would we deny someone? They are still saying that they'll be praying for you, even if it's not with words, that they'll be there for you, even if it is another language, if you want to call it that. What if we had someone in the congregation whose first language wasn't English, and they read your update, and they responded in their natural language, not thinking about it? Just because it's in Spanish or Chinese and you can't read it, doesn't mean they meant it any less. Is it less real? Because you didn't understand it. When we use that praying emoji, what matters? That we're saying, hey, we're praying for you? Or the fact that in the code, this is the high five symbol. Hey, my dad's on his deathbed. Yeah! According to the code, that's what we're saying, but what matters? The sentiment behind it, what we wanted to say, or what the thing said. What's real? What is real in digital medium? I'm going to start sharing the thing again. I did a little experiment this week. I'll get to the golf lesson, I promise. I'll pull up this other window. All right. Did a little experiment, and I had a few people. I went out to Twitter, and I went to a few personal people, and I asked, hey, would you be willing to do something for me? I want you to play a game. Which immediately everyone's like, wait, what? What do you want, Kyle? I asked them to go play a 3-minute game. We're going to run it through real quick with you guys, called Loneliness. And it's just going to take... That's a little louder than I thought it would be. I'm going to bump. The volume's on that. That's the issue. Thank you, Kane. It's a simple game. It's done in 3 minutes. I would have had more people do it, but then there wouldn't have been any reveal here. Thank you. Is it not? There it goes. Okay. Just takes a minute to get down. I had 6 people play this game this week. And I'll just go through it so that we all kind of have that shared experience of seeing what's going on. So we can keep moving here. Like I said, it's a simple game. It's just arrow keys to move around. Now I'll let you know. Subject 1, I'll keep all the names silent to protect the innocent. However, Subject 1 immediately kind of hackles her up because I said, can I get you to play a game? And he's like, it's called loneliness. But he kind of gamified it. He went through, kind of voted, some groups went through, and then just kind of went, I'm not going to let a game beat me, and went back to make sure that he scattered the other groups. And even went back as far as the beginning to make sure there wasn't something else in front of it. Mild emotional reaction. Got the point, though. Subject 2 is kind of a loner as well, and they saw the title Loneliness and assumed that avoiding the groups was kind of the point. But then as it faded to black, kind of, again, got the point of what they were trying to accomplish with this. Subject 3, they smiled gleefully as they made sure to careen into every group as they went along, including using the word charge at one point. Subject 4 saw what was going on and made sure to touch every group because he wanted to see, would the pattern change? He sought after answers. I'm trying to use they, but I keep switching. And after I got a reaction from subject 5, Sherry suggested that I just kind of demonstrate the game for you instead of get a volunteer. Subject 5 broke down, finding the game more relatable than they wanted to. Relating it to their own feelings of emotion, of loneliness, and dealing with that. I will say, like I said, I got 5 responses. Subject 6 was me 3 years ago when someone first pointed this game out to me. And while I didn't break down, I certainly had an emotional reaction to it. Hesitating before I approached that last dot, wondering if it was going to be different. Hesitating before finally stepping into the black. And when I first played the game, there was actually statistics near the end about the hometown of the person who designed the game in Korea and the suicide rates in college students being so exponentially higher than what it should have been. Done with that for just a hot minute. It's black boxes and a web browser in Flash code, which was officially decommissioned a couple weeks ago. Flash games, Flash cartoons on the internet, they won't support them anymore. You're going to have a hard time getting those to work if you enjoyed those particular sources. So for dots in a matrix at the end of the day, data points floating in a digital void that mean nothing on their own except for an XY coordinate in a Flash game, in a dead coding language, officially dead. But I got 6 different emotional responses from those who played the game. It was still real, what they felt. You can't say that because it was a digital medium that there was not serotonin or whatever hormones cause sadness. I tried to do a little research on that, and as best I could tell, sadness is only due to the fact that serotonin isn't in your body. As far as brain chemistry goes, I was trying to find some more answers on that, and I couldn't. That's still there. It's still there. Those elements are still there. So what is real in those instances? We often, I think too often, disregard emotion. We want us to be closed off. We want us to deal with things privately. This is something I brought up at the church, and unrelated a bit, but we have it's a comparison I think says something. When we have funerals and wakes these days, we tend to dress nice, and we're quiet, And we go and we give our condolences and we share emotion, and we might have some crying in the corner, some weeping. It's generally a quiet and it's very somber. But you go to the Bible and people are ripping clothes off and just wailing. They're letting that grief out. They're letting that be real and raw, even in front of people. And that's valid. And unfortunately, at least in America these days, we tend to devalue that. We want people to get back to normal because grief is uncomfortable, because emotion is uncomfortable. Even high exuberance can sometimes make us uncomfortable. How many people were looking at David like he might have been a little crazy dancing in front of that ark? Or how many people were allowing him that joyousness, that passion to be expressed in that moment? I'll tell you about another experience Sherry and I had. We tend to have pretty quiet church here. Most of the churches I've been to, we sit, we listen, and we talk, and we still fellowship, we still laugh and stuff like that. And I'll be honest, largely, in my experience through life, a more passionate congregation was largely seen as showmanship. And we tend to equate the seriousness with what is real and focused and determined and in that sort of sense. That this, because it's focused, because it's directed and contained, it is somehow better. And yet, Sherry and I went to a church that was very impassioned about what was going on. They had a song service at the beginning. They did just like ours. They did 2 songs. Their songs just ended after 45 minutes instead of after 6. And they cheered as the preacher was preaching, and they clapped and they danced as they sang and praised Christ. And to me, I would never be able to pull that off. I'm too closed in. There's that mild sheen of panic I keep. I don't want to, I hold on to it all too tight. I would never be able to let loose like that. Especially not in a public setting. Sherry gets me raving sometimes, but that's about it. Sherry gets me while I'm raving, not that you get me raving. That was poorly worded. That's why I stick to script. Red, shut up. But again, it was real, and it was strange to experience. We went to this impassioned church on the Sabbath. A group that sought the truth. They were keeping the food laws. They were keeping the holy days. They were keeping the Sabbath and the commandments as we understand them. And yet, it was still an environment that I had always assumed was for show. And that's awful on my part, I will admit. Hindsight being 20/20, that I would allow that kind of thing to be on there. And that's not to say that every impassioned display isn't. Again, layers of obfuscation. At the end of the day, what is real is the big question that we have to address every day. Regardless of whatever we're dealing with, whoever we're dealing with. That's why I keep asking it. But to kind of get us back onto course, the idea that we want people to possess their emotions in a certain way is narrow-minded of us. Again, we want people to try to get back on course and to deal with their grief, but unfortunately, grief is not a thing that goes away. It's not like pardon me, I'm sorry. It's not a condition that we eventually just get rid of, like a broken bone, like a bruise. It doesn't just go away. Again, it's dealing with that brain chemistry. And it doesn't go away because the bone comes back. That's why a broken bone goes away, is because the bone heals. But the loss of a loved one doesn't come back. I know, if I can use Sherry for an example, again, every mid-September, she gets rough because it's when she lost her grandmother, and her grandmother was very, very important to her, critical in her upbringing. And I know, grief isn't a thing that heals and just comes back. It is a rock that every so often we have to pick up. Some years it's heavier. Some years we're a little weaker, even if it hasn't gotten heavier. But what's important is that we do not define ourselves by those emotions. We don't have to define ourselves by the grief that we feel. We don't have to define ourselves by the happiness we feel. There are people who have anxiety because they're like, everyone sees me as so happy, so caring, and so giving, and sometimes I don't want to be. I'm tired. My energy's gone. I want to sit and be quiet and not deal with things for a minute. But everyone expects you to be happy because, again, you've built that up. But it's okay to build from that norm because that is still real. You cannot deny that that's what is happening, and we have to be allowed to feel these things. We aren't defined by these things. We aren't defined by what's ailing us. Yeah, and to take it to the next level up, I'm getting to the golf lesson, I promise. To get to the next level up, the idea that these things can cause things like depression, that we can deal with these neuroatypical issues. The world is different. If our brain doesn't let us see that there are people at the other end of the screen, our brain doesn't let us see it, even if we know it. But you can't tell. I'll bring up dyslexia because it's one I've looked at enough that I feel confident to say at least a little bit on it real quick. You can't tell a dyslexic person, just look at the word and sound it out, because their brain isn't wired to do that. There's other stuff that the brain isn't wired to do. It's not just the reading thing. But unless we look at someone that we know has that condition and understand how they have to look at things. Who remembers the meme, is the dress white and gold or blue and black? Our eyes and brains are literally wired different. The idea that we could look out the window and see a different color bush out there and it's normal. That's okay. We're wired differently sometimes, but we can't be defined by it. Too often we want things to be a certain way. This is on my mind just because it kind of brought up. There was a meme that got shared on Facebook of, it was like, oh man, tacos cause miracles. And it was a guy standing up out of a wheelchair to pay for his tacos. And this isn't to discredit the sharing of it or anything like that, but there is this sort of mentality where I've seen talking with other people on Twitter, people who have disabilities where they can't walk for very long. They can't, it causes them too much pain, they lose their balance too quickly. They can stand, they can walk, they just can't do it for long. They can't do it for too much, they can't run, but they're still in a wheelchair. And one lady was telling the story where she got her wheelchair up to a gate to go watch a soccer game, got up, walked through the metal detector, and the guy made a comment about it. And the guy was like, she was like, okay, yeah, but you're going to be there to pick me up in, 12 more steps. We tend to assume and we want things to be defined a certain way. If you're in a wheelchair, you have to stay in the wheelchair. Even if we don't mean to have these ideas, we have them. And this is just, come back. Sometimes it's ingrained in us and we're not even trying to let it be there. It just sometimes takes root. And sometimes taking root isn't putting a plant there, because that's a deliberate act of someone putting a seed there. Something has to happen for all that to happen. Sometimes taking root is like a fungus. It's a spore in the air and you don't even realize it's there until it's grown. But more often than not, those things are the easiest to get rid of because they don't have deep roots, so long as you're willing to get down there and scrape it off. But again, we shouldn't be defined by these things around us, even if it is part of what defines us. It is not the entire aspect of who we are. Just as much as the golf lesson, guys. Just as much as our sins and our flaws do not define us. What we struggle with does not mean that that is who we are. If we are diseased, if we have COVID, because this is the first one that popped into my head, we are not COVID. We are not defined by the COVID. We are not defined by the chicken pox. Nor should we be defined by our grief, nor should we be defined by our sin, because we can still rise above that. It is not who we are, it is an aspect of something that we are. That is not to condone sin, because indeed we are called to be perfect. But we are not lesser because we have sinned. At least not within regards to each other, because we have all sinned and fallen short of the prize, fallen short of the glory. But it is because of his grace, because he said while we were still enemies that he will save us, that he will sacrifice himself for us, that puts us on an equal playing field. No amount of repentance makes us any better than anyone else. We are not defined by our sin, and we should be able to have compassion in the same way that we can look at someone else and realize they're looking at the world differently because they're still dealing with grief. I was just a lonely kid in high school. So the game impacted me a little bit. But for someone else who dealt with much worse things for me, that thing meant more to them and impacted them more. That's why I was originally going to have a volunteer come up and play the game. And I was just going to sit back, and we were all going to observe. And man, wouldn't that be a jerk move for us to sit there and treat someone who came up here and had that bad a reaction as our little lab monkey for a silly 3-minute demonstration in one of my nonsense ramblings. So I changed my mind on that one. It's about compassion and perception. Even before we got the commandments, God commanded, love others as you love yourself. The idea that not only should you value other people as much as you value yourself, but you should make sure that you're valuing yourself as much as you do other people. I know I'm guilty of that one, the latter. Not valuing the self as much as other people. That's our own balancing game. And some days, I'm sure for some of us, it goes back and forth. Some days we're more worried about ourselves than others, and some days the other way around. And the reason that it should matter to all of us is because it matters to Him. He sent us the Comforter. That's a really specific term. Because think about it, at the change when He left, the world was changing. The temple was going to be torn down. There wasn't a community necessarily. All of a sudden, we were scattered in a world that had it out for us. The high priest had to be able to reach to us directly, without the veil, without us being able to go to the high priest and for him to make atonement for us. It mattered that we were able to reach Him, even if we were alone in the wilderness, separated from everyone else, hunted down by whoever may be getting us. And it matters that we help each other through these things, because at the end of the day, that's what He's going to do. Revelation 21. Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and He will dwell with them, and they shall be His people. God Himself will be with them and be their God, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Then He who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And He said to me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And He said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give of the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. He has promised us that He will be with us, that He will remove these things because they matter to Him. If they didn't matter, He wouldn't be worried about taking them from us. He'd be like, here's your eternal life, let's get to work. He sent us a comforter, and He's going to come and remove these shackles, these carnal bindings that keep us here and keep us stunted and keep us grieving and keep us angry at each other. They matter enough to Him that He's going to shake the earth to get them from us. I won't bother bringing it up. I just want to close on one thought. The memes I brought up. Two of them that y'all saw flash by there real quick were just black and white hand-drawn images, yeah? Those were some of the first memes, as they were called back then. Most people, meme is funny picture with that italic bold, that particular font, in white with a black strike around the text. That is just what a meme is. whether it's sarcastic Wonka, whether it's the grumpy cat, Icon has cheeseburger, whoever it is. That's just what a meme is. Memes originally were those black and white pictures, just simple drawings that had a meaning, and that was just it. Because memes meant that you didn't need to know what was going on. You just knew that there was a shared thought. The term meme was first introduced in 1976 by Richard Dawkins in his work, The Selfish Gene. The idea of a meme is the idea that it is shared. It is shared knowledge, it is shared experience, that when we show a picture of Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard holding his face to his hand, we know what's going on. Even if that wasn't the context of that particular frame. We know someone is upset and confused when we see a black and white image of Jackie Chan holding his hand to his head like this. We know. Yes, that's a relatively easy picture to do, but again, these memes were shared with people who understood the punchline every time they came up, and they didn't need the text because we knew that even in these silly memes, even in this thing, the idea of this connectivity between each other, when we open ourselves up to each other, when we allow each other to share those burdens, when we wail with each other, when we dance with each other in joy, we are connected, we are something, and we can create a little bit of that promise before we get there.